race fans, and welcome to Above the Yellow Line. This is a special episode coming to you in two parts with special guest Zachary Bell. Part 1 is all about the Buschy McBusch 400. We're going to recap that a little bit, and then we're going to go into the next gen car reveal. It's one you don't want to miss. Also, you don't want to miss part 2 of this video where we talk about the Darlington throwback paint schemes. They were super fun to look over and talk about some of the history of that. As well, we go into our race predictions, picks, and track facts. So stay tuned for part 1 and part 2. Part 1 is at you now, and then part 2 is coming out on Saturday. So without further ado, let's get started. Hello race fans, my name is Taylor and welcome to Above the Yellow Line, the show where we talk about all the updates, theories, news, recaps, and more of the NASCAR Cup Series. This is a mini recap of the Buschy McBusch 400. This is also an updates video of like a lot of stuff. We have the next gen car, we have Darlington throwbacks, and clearly I'm not alone. Say hello to Zachary Bell, Zach Bell, who is joining us again very graciously. Thank you for coming back on the show.
It's always an honor to come back on. The best part of having your own podcast is when you get recognized by somebody else and the excellence of your own podcast and be asked to be a guest on their podcast.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad you're back. It's so fun to talk to you about all these things. Do you want to like mention anything, any updates for your channel and stuff before we?
Well, we just posted our episode recap of the Buschy McBusch Race 400 over on Dipstick Debates. You were so graciously able to co-host and replace Justin. It's so much better than him. But other than that, there is a vlog coming out soon. I hope it's in the works of my NASCAR racing experience at Texas Motor Speedway. So the first time I ever got to drive a race car. And then in 2 weeks, I'll be down at Circuit of the Americas for the Cup race and the entire race weekend. So I'll be trying to turn that into a vlog. I'm an amateur vlogger. I don't have the great transitions like the TikTok stars do. And I don't really have all the camera qualities that someone like Eric Estep does. But the content will be just as good. I'm trying my best.
You're working on it. It's first step. It's all good stuff.
Yeah.
Also want to mention we're throwing it back a little bit. I have everyone probably recognizes this if you've seen my Twitter account, but my Dale Senior jacket on. Zach, I'm jealous of your shirt. The William Byron Days of Thunder.
Days of Thunder 2019 William Byron throwback. One of my favorite throwback schemes of all time, and it's always nice to see the 24 team throwback to something something that's not Jeff Gordon, in my opinion.
It's so easy to do that. It really is.
Yes. These big name historical NASCAR teams, they can get kind of lazy with their throwbacks.
They can. Well, we will talk about that in a little bit. We're going to dive through all those things, but we got to start by recapping the Buschy McBusch race. I hate saying it. I'm so glad this is the last time I have to say it this year, I hope. So you all know how this race went by now. So on the screen, I'm going to flip it over for you guys to see is the finishing order of this event. Kyle Busch, the birthday boy, back in victory lane before Kevin Harvick, before Denny Hamlin. I want to ask you, Zach, what do you think of this? What do you make of your boy Denny Hamlin not making it to victory lane? 9-time winner last year, not making it back. Kyle Busch, do you think there's more wins coming? Do you think this is just like one win and it's left? What do you make of this?
Listen, last season, I listened to the guy who was like, not going to say Kyle Busch didn't win. The lead guy over at Racing Refresh, AJ Appeal, made the bold prediction that Kyle Busch wouldn't win a race in 2020. And he was almost right. But let me tell you, I'm making the bold prediction that he'll probably win at least one more race.
Okay.
It doesn't matter the year. It doesn't matter the season. It doesn't matter the race car. He's Kyle Busch. Like, eventually talent's going to win out. And I think that he kind of lucked into this race a little bit there with Kyle Larson kind of fading out of the picture a little bit. And then that final restart, everything got so hectic, he was just able to coast off. But it doesn't change the fact that Kyle Busch was a front runner all day. He ended up winning stage 1. So I wouldn't be surprised if Kyle Busch wins another race. Although I would guess it would come at like a 750 track. I really have Nashville specifically penciled as somewhere he could win it. I believe he was the last driver to win at Nashville in the then called the Nationwide Series, but the Xfinity Series today. So with a track like that has practice as well, I feel like Kyle Busch has a really good shot to win there.
I would agree with you. I think we're going to see him win again. I don't know when that's going to be. I don't know if it's going to be this weekend, but I mean, there's such a wide variety of winners this year. I mean, I'm still shocked we haven't seen heavy hitters. I mean, even Chase Elliott win. We haven't seen that. We'll talk about that in a second when we go down the lineup here for the top 15. I usually do the top 10, but I think the top 15, I think you can agree with me, Zach. This race has been very interesting, or at least last weekend's race. So Kyle Busch was in first. We had Kevin Harvick in second, getting closer to a win. Stop me if you want to talk about anybody as well. Just putting it out there. Do you want to talk about Harvick for a second?
I'll say this about Kevin Harvick. I have gone on to say that he will have a Kyle Busch-esque season like Kyle Busch had last year in 2020, and I still kind of think that's true for Kevin Harvick. But I think Kevin Harvick is good enough to make it to the round of 8 this year. I kind of see him fading out in the round of 8, going kind of by the wayside there. But I have no doubt that Kevin Harvick can win a race this season. He's too good. He's too good. And there's one thing that I feel like SHR did better than any other team, and there's even some statistics to back this up, is they were really the best at these 2-mile oval tracks. So like Michigan and stuff. With Michigan still on the schedule, 2 trips, of course, a doubleheader at Pocono, everything like that, that kind of helps him out for a good chance to win. We know that there's another trip to Atlanta where he's so good as well. I wouldn't be surprised if we see how Harvick in victory lane once or twice this year.
Fingers crossed for him and his team. My goodness. I mean, they need a victory at some point this year. We have Keselowski in third, Matt DiBenedetto in fourth. He's finishing better every single week.
Yeah. I think when the last time I was on your show and we were looking at the point standings, I think we really wrote Matt DiBenedetto off in like must-win category, and he must have listened to you and me. I'm going to say listen to you because he is driving with a fire out there, and he is looking a lot more viable to point his way in. I still want to see him get the win just so like I as a fan or you as a fan can know that he can win a race, because that's a question I have about Matt DiBenedetto is he has lost ways in about every way possible, it feels. And it's just time to see him, put that car in victory lane. So I'm hopeful we still see that, but because to me, that's how I define his season as a success, is if he wins. If he doesn't win, to me, the 2021 season is kind of a flop.
He is right now in on points. We're not going to talk about point standings this episode. We will talk about it. Zach and I will talk about it. I'll mention this a little later, but we'll talk about it in a week or two when we do our kind of points debriefing mid-regular season. I love Matt DiBenedetto. I want him to win. I have one of his cars like up here right next to me. I want the best for him, and I know he's going into a year where he doesn't know what's going to happen. I mentioned on Twitter, I heard Larry Mack talk about this after last weekend's race, that Penske has a plan for him apparently. That rumor has it. So we'll see what ends up happening there at Team Penske, whether it's Wood Brothers, he stays there, and then Penske opens up a fourth car. We don't know yet, but thinking that I think he could get a win. He's inching closer and closer. Either the trend stops or he ends with a win or I don't know. I want him to do well, but someone who also I want to do well, last year's champion, Chase Elliott, like top 5 after a few really abysmal weeks. Out of 11 races, this is Chase Elliott's 5th top 10 finish this season. Zach, should we be concerned for last year's champ? And keeping in mind that the next few races are kind of his favorite tracks, what are your concerns?
I'm not concerned about Chase Elliott at all. And I know that there are a lot of Chase Elliott fans that are like, he's the reigning champion, but we've seen this sort of start out of Chase Elliott year after year after year. He's a second half of the season driver. If we remember last year, his first one of the season didn't come until that second Charlotte race, the race after the 600. So I wouldn't be surprised if, we're sitting at the All-Star break and Chase Elliott doesn't have a win or only has one win. I know that we've talked about Chase Elliott winning on the road courses, but there's Circuit of the Americas, which is a brand new road course, so we can expect Chase to do well. He'll probably be the favorite, but I can't say that I can't pencil him in to win like I would at maybe Watkins Glen or a trip to the Charlotte Roval, that they'll make in October, I believe. And he's not great at Sonoma either. That's usually a track dominated by Toyota and Martin Truex Jr. So I would look towards maybe a win at Darlington if you're looking for a win this weekend. Maybe I think Chase could win this weekend. I look at Dover because he's won at Dover before as a place he could possibly win, and Charlotte as well. He was so close to winning the 600 last year, and so Alan Gustafson goofed up that pit call.
Yeah,
comes back and wins the 300-mile race or whatever at Charlotte the next or a couple days later. So I'm not concerned about Chase Elliott. If we get to the 4th of July maybe, and Chase hasn't won, I'll start being a little worried, but he's still top 7 or 8 in points. I'm not too concerned about what Chase has for the rest of the season. I still think he's a very, very viable championship contender.
I'm glad to hear you say that. I'm a little concerned, being a little bit more of a Chase fan, but we do have the favorable tracks coming up, and I do know it was good for you to point out that he is a second half of the season driver, and once he wins one, he kind of gets on a roll. At least that's how it's been last year and the year before. So he finished 5th. We have Truex in 6th, Tyler Reddick in 7th, a top 10 finish for Tyler Reddick. The RCR guys.
Tyler Reddick there, and
Yeah.
kind of his chances of turning around his season too. We're going to a string of chats that Tyler Reddick has ran well at too. He had a top 10 at Darlington when NASCAR returned last year. I wouldn't be surprised if Tyler Reddick runs well this weekend. This is a track that plays well to his strengths. A car that's on edge, that you can rip the top. You can rip the top in Darlington, and you can be really effective. And Darlington rewards the drivers with the most confidence and the most ability to push their cars on the edge and off the limits. So I wouldn't be surprised if Tyler Reddick could win this weekend possibly. He's a sleeper pick in my opinion.
He was going to be my garage pick, or at least one of my fantasy lineup picks on the NASCAR app. I mean, because I know how he did last year, and he did really well. We have Buescher in 8th, Byron in 9th, and I have to go on my little spiel here about William Byron. I have to. I mean, you're wearing the shirt, but this is his 9th consecutive top 10. Like, no one's talking about it, and if they talk about it, it's like for 5 seconds at the end of a broadcast. And that doesn't get enough credit. I mean, he is sitting 3rd in points right now. And this is his 3rd full year in the Cup Series. He's doing better points-wise than his teammates. And I don't know, not getting enough credit. That's all I want to say about William Byron. I go on this high horse every week of the podcast.
I'll say this. William Byron is emerging as a legitimate championship contender here.
He is.
He's definitely looking like a lock for the round of 8 with his consistency. I wouldn't be surprised if he pulls another win or two out. I mean, it's hard when you look at how many people have already won races this season and how far along we're in and who hasn't won a race yet, like Denny Hamlin, Chase Elliott, Kevin Harvick, maybe even someone like Kurt Busch could possibly win a race. It's really hard to sit there and say, like, oh, someone's going to win a bunch of races, It's really, really hard. But if somebody does do it, I wouldn't be surprised if it's William Byron. He seems to be kind of maturing as a personality a little bit off the track. Of course, we heard about his mom's brain tumor this week and everything, and those things are so sad and tragic to think about, but this is the sort of thing that can really fuel a driver and motivate them for a long portion of the season, if not the rest of the way. So I know that a lot of us have thought that maybe Chase Elliott or Kyle Larson would be the Hendrick Chevrolet or the Hendrick car to represent Chevrolet in the championship 4, but I think the question needs to be asked if it could be William Byron.
And I think, honestly, as the season's gone on, I've been pretty shocked at how I know there's kind of a championship lull. I think we've seen that like every single season when it comes to the championship winner, and then we have them kind of have an abysmal start to the season. So I kind of expected that with Chase Elliott, to be honest with you. I just didn't expect William Byron to kind of be picking up the slack of the team. And I mentioned this to you, Zach, off camera, but I've been noticing like if Chase Elliott and if Kyle Larson do well one weekend, then it's Bowman and Byron that don't do so hot. And it kind of flip-flops. It's been doing that the past few weeks, I would say.
Yeah, but I would say that Byron's kind of been more consistently in the middle.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think he's been the best car at Hendrick Motorsports most of these weekends since his win at Homestead, but he's always been like second or like third, but like third on a good day for HMS,
And I would say consistency, honestly, I think this season, if you're not going to get in on a win, and obviously William Byron has a win, I expect him to win again, and maybe another time. I'm going to predict maybe have 3 wins this season. Bold prediction, but consistency is going to really help you out. And if you can tack onto that consistency early in the season, it's going to help you for playoffs. Now, things could go topsy-turvy on playoffs, as we know, as we saw last year. But I think having that team be so consistent so early on, especially, still COVID, no practice, I mean, that's a championship caliber team. So I agree with you. We have to look at him as a championship driver. I want to talk about 10th place, Austin Dillon. He's another RCR driver finishing out in the top 10. Very good day for him. I want to quickly go over the top 15, and then we can break them down a little bit. We have Suarez in 11th. I know I definitely want to talk about Daniel Suarez here. Hamlin in 12th. Zach's favorite driver. Michael McDowell in 13th. Ross Chastain in 14th. And Kurt Busch in 15th. Both Chip Ganassi guys, 14th and 15th. I'm going to go on a little... I guess a praise about Daniel Suarez as a new team, kind of new car, new everything. I mean, come on, like that is so impressive. He's been like finishing like kind of in 15th, like in that kind of range every single week. Of course, he might have a bad week, and we've seen him get into it with maybe William Byron one weekend, but he's doing incredibly well. And I don't know what they have figured out that the other new teams don't. but they seem to have really good chemistry over there at their team. I mean, I don't know. What do you make of this, Zach?
Uh, there's a couple of things that I think contribute to Daniel Suarez's success. The first thing, and I think we saw this last year when he's driving for Gaunt Brothers, and it's very hard to recognize things out of a driver when they're running most often between 25th and 30th. But I thought that Daniel Suarez last year at Gaunt Brothers elevated that car a little bit above what it was running with, like Parker Kligerman, for example. And then he goes into a brand new team at Trackhouse, and I think he's elevating the equipment here. But I want to shout out his crew chief, Travis Mack. He
Mm-hmm.
used Michael Annette in the Xfinity Series at Junior Motorsports. Um, Travis Mack is someone who is routinely responsible for risky pit calls, staying out late, or someone who will pit early as well. It kind of just depends on the track and the situation. And I think that as long as Travis Mack isn't getting kicked out of races for that 99 car failing inspection, because they failed it a few times this year, a
Two or three
few
times.
times, yeah, multiple times. So we've seen Travis Mack get thrown out of races, but if Travis Mack cannot get thrown out of races, I think his ability to strategize around what that team can do, what that car can do, what Daniel Suarez can do is going to elevate them and continue to elevate them. And if you think about it, a race like Atlanta, where he was in the top 10 and he ended up speeding on pit road in stage 3, threw away a top 10 run there. So there's more points that they've left on the board. For example, they got wrecked out in the Daytona 500 as well.
Mm-hmm.
A track, and Suarez is a decent plate racer. We know that. So, or super speedway racer, I should say. So I'm not terribly surprised Daniel Suarez is doing this well. I think the thing that makes Trackhouse and Suarez so surprising is the hype that was built around Bubba Wallace in 2311 racing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I would say that team, you looked at it, they were like the only new team in the sport. Like, forget like Live Fast, forget all the other ones. It was 2311. And everyone else that was new was like, oh, okay, welcome to the sport. Here's your brochure and let's move on. But I mean, I would say it's kind of the hype train. And we're seeing that a lot with, I want to say maybe even the next gen car. We're seeing that with the SRX series, but like the whole hype and then kind of maybe not the letdown, but you have to realize there's a lot of key elements that go behind the scenes. Like, I mean, for example, I mean, Bubba Wallace's team, they're new crew chief. Um, Bubba drove a Chevy last year with Kyle. Oh my goodness, the Kyle Petty Motorsports. Um, Richard Petty Motorsports. My goodness, I paint schemes in my head. But yeah, like it's a whole new thing for him. So I don't know. I mean, there's just a lot to keep you in your mind when you think about these new teams, and the expectations I think were blown way out of proportion, unfortunately, for Bubba Wallace, and he's really having to fight those expectations.
Here's the thing I want to talk about Bubba Wallace really quickly and what I think is going on. And I listened to Door Bumper Clear, and Freddie Kraft kind of explained this a little bit after that Talladega race, is that Freddie Kraft, his spotter, I should say,
Mm-hmm.
is that when they were at RPM, they were having to push their car to the limits to get 25th, 20th place runs, right? This car at 2311 is built to run in the top 15 with the equipment he has. But the problem that I'm seeing Bubba Wallace has, and the problem that is he's acting like he's driving for Richard Petty Motorsports in a car that is so significantly better than what Richard Petty Motorsports has, that it makes him make mistakes and wreck a little bit more, or push the car over the edge, and he gets into the wall and it kind of ruins their day, sort of thing. I just think that he's driving this significantly better car like it's not a very good car.
That's interesting. I have not thought of that. I would say, I mean, that didn't think about that. That could be it. I also think bad luck.
Yes,
Honestly.
they've been a bit unlucky, but NASCAR is a sport built with luck and guys who are lucky and unlucky almost every week. But there are certainly been some moments and sometimes I flash back to the Virtual Dirt race, for example, where he should have had a top 10 and he blew that tire and NASCAR didn't call the caution and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, we will talk about tire and caution calls in a few seconds. We're going to move on out of the top 10 or the top 15. I do want to mention my race pick. I mention this every week about my race picks, but Alex Bowman was mine. Finished 18th. He had an alternator issue. I was not happy. I was sitting at home. I was like, man, I chose the wrong guy. But he was able to keep his car in the race, which was fantastic. Such a bummer there. I also want to talk about his teammate, Kyle Larson, who dominated much of this race. We talked about how it was kind of the Kyle show, I would say. Kyle Busch and Kyle Larson. It was kind of a battle between them. And on a late race restart, he got caught behind Ryan Blaney. He pushed Blaney, and they both almost kind of spun out. I don't know how Ryan Blaney was able to save that, but he did. Unfortunately, though, both of them starting within the top 5 on that last restart. Larson finished 19th and Blaney finished 21st. And usually at this point, I mentioned we're not going to do points talk this time because we're going to keep things moving along here, but we're going to talk about them in the next week or two. So look up for that episode. Before we move on to the main events of this episode, when we go to the Next Gen and Darlington talk, we talked about this on your show, Zach, but with 52 to go, we had an incident during green flag pit stops where Tyler Reddick's crew lost a tire on pit road, went through his pit box, through pit lane, and then into the infield grass center. Usually stuff like this, NASCAR will call a caution right away because it presents kind of a present danger, but we didn't see one. We did not see one right away, and it took 15 laps later for them to pull a caution after green flag pit cycles went through. Zach, I'm going to get off my high horse and I'm going to let you I'm going to let you talk about this. I want to hear your frustrations with this.
This is so ridiculous. And the worst part is if you're listening to post-race, so you're seeing Bob Pockers out there on Twitter tweeting post-race interviews, and the drivers are like, oh, well, we expected NASCAR to hold the flag. Like, what is wrong with NASCAR? If it's a caution and a danger on lap 251 when they called the caution, or if it's a caution and a danger with they called it like 38 to go or something, or 37 to go, something like that.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah, if it's a caution with that amount of laps to go, it should also be a caution with 52 laps to go. The danger doesn't change. Why on earth they think that it's cool to let Chris Buescher go and cycle down pit road? Because this was a staring contest between Chris Buescher and his crew chief Luke Lambert and NASCAR, and they were just like, who's going to flinch first? And Buescher ended up flinching first, and then NASCAR threw the caution. He's lucky. We were lucky he rallied for a top 10. But this is the type of stuff that if that race didn't have if that caution, if the race didn't have another caution later on that involved Denny Hamlin, it's the type of stuff that ruins somebody on a top 10 day or something where they're trying to play the strategy game. And NASCAR should not be interfering with team strategy. Not okay. This is race manipulation. And here's the thing. I don't think it's intentional race manipulation, because if they're intentionally manipulating a race, they should have thrown the caution when Chris Buescher was the leader and created drama of Chris Buescher being the guy on the freshest tires or the best track position with the lead. And, he would have an upset winner. No. These are the type of things that make me not want to watch NASCAR. And I'm not going to turn off NASCAR. I'll never turn off NASCAR. But these are the things that make me wish I had the confidence to do so.
I literally, exact same comments. I would say this was pretty blatant race manipulation. Usually, like, NASCAR has no problem pulling out a yellow flag during an instance like that. But this time, I mean, I think if it was any other driver, maybe, and I'm not speaking for NASCAR. I'm not saying they would do this, but it's like any other driver. Maybe this wouldn't have happened. And then, Buescher had the lead. Stenhouse pitted, they were all going to stay out. And I was thinking, I'm like, well, if he stayed out, it could have been a race from him. It could have been a Stenhouse race. So I don't know. You said everything that I was going to say. I'm going to move on because I'm going to get super angry. Actually, like, I want to ask you, I mean, you kind of started talking about this, but as a fan, week after week, we keep seeing this from NASCAR. It's been really bad this season so far. We've seen the Daytona Road Course one. That literally almost killed me for NASCAR. It didn't, I'm like, joke, but what do you think? What's the breaking point for fans? When is this going to start to really turn fans away? And what can NASCAR do, in your opinion, to stop this or to get better?
Clearly define what a caution is. I understand you're frustrated about the rain at the Daytona Road Course, but I'll say this, and here is how I would define a NASCAR caution. Anything that poses any threat to the danger or safety of the drivers, track personnel, or teams.
Did you just read the manual? Did you?
No, I didn't.
That's the manual.
But this is how they should be calling the race. It may be written in the rule book as such, but they don't call it that way. They really don't. And that's the thing. You brought up the Daytona Road Course rain thing. I could go ahead and say that that's a safety issue. The rain is a safety issue. I'm cool with them throwing the caution for the rain if they decide to throw the caution for the tire when it's called at the right time. But if we're going to sit here and say that this tire isn't a threat for 15 laps, then the rain shouldn't have been a threat at Daytona, is my opinion. They should either both be cautions or they should neither be cautions. And NASCAR shouldn't be waiting to throw cautions either. This is the type of thing that gets people seriously hurt or injured or killed at NASCAR races, and this is the type of thing that it'll end NASCAR. You know.
Yeah, fans are over the edge, and I want to talk about our race ratings now because this kind of plays a factor into it. I always talk about Jeff Gluck and his race poll that he has on Twitter. I think it played a factor in how much fans really did not like this race, but we're gonna rate this race above or below the yellow line. I'm excited to have you, Zach, rate your first race here. You'd be the first person ever, and besides me, to do the scale here. So what is your score and why?
I picked a 65%, and we have talked about this off air, and I rated the race based off of how often I was on my phone not watching the race, or how often I'm willing to go to the bathroom while the race is on TV. If a race is good, I won't look at my phone. I will wait till commercial breaks to go to the restroom. So this race, on my phone, I was playing Madden on my phone a little bit. I was messaging you. I was on TikTok for like 5 minutes.
Man, that's when you know.
I was cooking, helping cook dinner, so I wasn't like I was watching the race, but it wasn't always 100% the entire time. So this is my problem, right? I gave it a 65. The manipulation of the tire thing doesn't sit well with me because it led to some unfortunate events afterwards. And you reference I'm a Denny Hamlin fan, and I think people that listen to this know I'm a Denny Hamlin fan. But I would be just as salty and bitter if it happened to anybody else too. Okay, I promise you. It's a little worse for Denny Hamlin, maybe, but like we would all be salty and bitter. Like, I mean, there's a direct correlation between that caution and then what happens the rest of the race throughout the end.
It was a chain reaction. It really was. I mean, there was a lot more cautions that happened because it shuffled the field up.
Caution. Ricky Stenhouse has 2 cautions. Christopher Bell gets wrecked in the process. Ryan Preece gets wrecked in the process. Kyle Larson goes from winning this race to 19th. Ryan Blaney's going to have a top 10, top 5 run. He finishes 21st. Kyle Busch ends up winning. Kevin Harvick finishes 2nd. There's a series of events that were not going to happen if NASCAR had properly called that tire caution. It should have properly called the tire caution. If they had called it with 52 to go, there's a lot more of the race left than when they end up calling the caution with like 35 to go. They end up getting back to green with like 35 to go, So it just changes the look of the race, and it stains and taints the race just a little bit for me. If they hadn't manipulated it, it probably would have been like a 70 or a 75%.
I feel I was too generous.
You were.
And anyone who's going to listen to this is going to be like, she is crazy. Like, I don't know what race she watched because I gave this race, I'm so afraid to put this out there, but I gave this race an 80%. I did. And here's why. I really did enjoy the majority of this race. Stage 2 kind of knocked it down 10 points. It was a little dull, but we've seen much worse this season, I would say. And that incredibly crappy call was another 10%. And here's where I defend my answer. I took a look at the rest of my race ratings this season, and this one, for me at least, was better than Phoenix. And I rated the Phoenix the Instacart 500 a 78%. So this race ranks 5 out of 11 out of all the ones that I've ranked so far this season. And as I know, as we go along, I might change the numbers. I'd already changed the Daytona 500 number because I was a wimp. And I was like, we're going to rank this one in 65%. And then I changed it to a 30 because I thought the Daytona 500 was not good this year.
It was a really bad race. That was like a 40% at best.
I was really upset. So I did change that one. I could change my numbers again as we go along. Obviously, there are 36 races in the season, correct? That's the number we're going off of? Yeah, so things are going to change. And I'm going to forget a lot of things. So some of you might think this is too high of a rating. And I want to be clear that my rating does not defend NASCAR's decision and what they decided to do with the tire. I didn't let that cloud my judgment, though. It really made me angry what they did, but I didn't let that kind of cloud my judgment and ruin the whole entire race for me, because there was some really exciting racing. And the first stage after Brad Keselowski kind of took over, and then after Larson took over, there was some exciting racing mid-pack. So I want to say, so I think the way people view this race, according to what I saw on Jeff Gluck's race poll, only 57% of people said that they like this race.
You have to remember, Kyle Busch won this race, and this will always affect Jeff Gluck's poll.
Exactly. I was going to say there's 2 reasons for this.
It's probably somewhere around that 65 to 75% range, if you're being honest about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say there's 2 reasons. The winner will always affect the end of a race. if you're looking online especially, and this call. I saw a lot of comments about the call being like, if you support the call or you give it higher than a 60%, you're nuts. Like, you support NASCAR. And that's why I wanted to defend my answer here. At least I'm not really a person that defends stuff like that, but here we are. I'm crazy, but I don't feel like I'm that crazy with my rating. Could have been a 75, but like I said, I looked back at my ratings and I feel like it was a better race than Phoenix.
It was. Now I'll say I agree with your rating in relation to your other ratings, because I am someone who routinely, and by routinely I mean always, listens to your show. So I don't rank the races on my podcast, but like I remember and think about the races I would prefer this to. And I would say that this is like a top, 3 or 4 race of the season for me personally, probably after Martinsville and Las Vegas and Homestead.
Those were good ones.
Maybe no, that's about it really. It's probably the 4th season. Talladega was higher.
That one was that my number. I think that was my new number 1. I think, honestly,
I really enjoyed Homestead this year, honestly, but Talladega was really good too. So I think Martinsville is probably my favorite race of the season so far, but I'm sure that'll change this weekend. I really, really love some good Darlington racing. But anyways, back to the thing.
Yeah,
in respect to your rankings, the 80% makes sense. If I were to go on here and say 80% based on the way I perceive races, I am definitely drinking the NASCAR Kool-Aid if I did that.
Yeah, I'm looking back at my ratings and I'm kind of like, wow, I rated things really high. And I'm trying to remember, I have a 0 to 100 scale. I don't feel like I'm utilizing that well, but also this is the first season I'm ranking things. But I digress. We have talked about rankings. We have talked about numbers. We have a lot more to talk about, though. So let's move on. Let's look through what we got to do here. Next gen car. We got to talk about the next gen car because that happened today as we're recording on a Wednesday. So they revealed the next gen car coming out in 2022 during Speed Week is when it's going to debut. A lot of collaboration, a lot of testing that they talked about went on. Of course, we saw all the testing. Now, Zach and I are not car experts. We're not mechanics. We don't know motors and whatever. So we're just going to spit out our initial thoughts and opinions and share some of what was revealed. And maybe on a later date, I'll have someone on the show that can kind of teach me and you guys what the heck is happening with these cars and what truly makes them mechanically different. But I want to start literally the live stream. I was expecting like a whole build up, but no, there was like a little video to start with. And then bam, the curtain opened and we have all the cars. We have Chase Elliott in the Chevy. We have Joey Logano in the Ford. And then we have Denny Hamlin in the Toyota. I know Zach was probably really happy about that. And it was pretty neat. They wasted no time. We got to hear the cars too. They sound different clearly, and they're very sleek. They resembled actually a street car look, which is one of the main points they talked about during this reveal. They also said that this vehicle will push NASCAR into the future while also embracing NASCAR's stock roots. On air, we had Steve Phelps, John Probst, and we also had Steve O'Donnell. Zach, I'm done talking for a second. I want to start with your initial thoughts on the next gen car. Did you like a model more than the others? And then what are your concerns, if you have any right now, or what are you really excited about?
Yes, I was in your spaces earlier and I stood alone in my opinion of this. I really enjoyed the Chevy look. I might be the only person who enjoys the Chevy look. I haven't seen much love for Chevrolet necessarily, unless there's some Chevrolet blowhards out there. First of all, it needs to be noted, I am a Toyota fan first and foremost. Most of my favorite drivers drive Toyotas, including my favorite. But that Camaro looks nice. The Camaro is my favorite car of all time, a street car anyways. And for them to go to a car that looks more like the street car is something that is very appealing to someone like me. And I'll say this, and we've kind of heard from their testing that it's looking like this car is going to be more built for road courses and, maybe some short tracks and stuff, which is all fine and dandy. But NASCAR's biggest problem, and the reason why they should be making a new car, is because their intermediate racing sucks. As a general statement, their intermediate track package is well behind what they do on the short tracks and the road courses. They should be fixing that, and my concern is they have not addressed this at all. Tracks like Texas, Charlotte, a track that you used to go to in Kentucky, may it rest in peace, may all be extinct in the near future, if NASCAR doesn't fix it. We'll all be running the Texas Roval, we'll revive Kentucky, and we'll run the Kentucky Roval, everything else. Or they'll just go run the Kentucky Derby on the dirt track or something over there. Who
You
knows
never
what's up
know.
with NASCAR? Oh,
There's Yeah, there's a few things too I want to get your opinion on as well. When we talked about when I saw the whole thing, there was some interesting wording that Steve Phelps used. He said this will make our sport healthier. I clearly feel upgrading these cars to make them more multi-purpose. I mean, gosh, as you mentioned, definitely needs to happen. He also said that this quote puts the stock back in stock car. This is exactly what Tony said. Tony Stewart said word for word about his SRX series, which I found interesting. And I mentioned that I had a Twitter space open with a bunch of other fans going on, and we all kind of had a roundtable discussion, which was super, super fun. I'm hoping to do that again. A little competition in the air. Of course, there's been little tinges of competition with all of them. Like Tony Stewart will post something during a race, or NASCAR will make an announcement, and it's like, oh, SRX has to make an announcement now. So, Zach, what do you think this is a very opinionated question, but do you think the superstar racing experience is way over their heads, or do you think that they have a legitimate chance at competing with NASCAR in some small way,
in a small way, yes. I would buy that the SRX could put a better racing product out than NASCAR could.
What makes you
Uh,
say that?
well, I mean, I think that Tony Stewart and Ray Evernham have a really good mind for race cars. I would argue that their mind for race cars is probably just as good, if not better, than the guys who are working at NASCAR. And I get the vibe that the difference is that the SRX is focused on good racing and big personalities within the cars, and NASCAR is focused on entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
It should be. I don't think the SRX will ever come in and topple NASCAR. Like NASCAR is not going to go away because of the SRX or anything like that. And the SRX should be and hopefully will be an IROC sort of series, but on short tracks. But I think the SRX can rival NASCAR in its short track racing, and definitely in its dirt racing. Because I was not fond of the dirt race, and you were on Dipstick Debates that week, and you know how not fond I
Oh
was of.
goodness, that was a fun episode. Highly recommend watching it, by the way.
Go back and get the rewatch on that one. But then the personalities as well. Like I think they can compete there. I mean, it's really hard. NASCAR doesn't have someone like Tony Stewart outside of Kyle Busch necessarily, and
Mm-hmm.
when you have big names like Bill Elliott in there, Billy
Michael
Keeler,
Waltrip.
Elio Castroneves, Marco Andretti, big racing names in that series that NASCAR doesn't have in its series necessarily. So there's some things that it can compete on, but I don't think it'll really be much of a competition for NASCAR. And I certainly hope NASCAR doesn't see the SRX as a competition to stoop to that sort of level of only competing with the SRX. I'm much more concerned with competing with F1 and the global spectrum of racing,
Mm-hmm.
and IndyCar on the domestic, American side of auto racing. They're
And
much bigger threats than the SRX poses, in my opinion.
I think that is what they're focusing on. I don't see NASCAR scrambling or worrying about the SRX. I think they're just kind of like they're in the corner. It's like the younger brother. You're like, okay, you're good. I'm just gonna watch, keep you at distance. I'm gonna play on my phone while you just do your thing. I think that's what's going to happen right now. Maybe if they gain traction, yes. And I've talked about this on the podcast before. I won't go into that because there's a few more points I want to bring up. We'll talk about the number placement in a second. I want your opinion on it because I've shared mine. But before that, I want to ask one of my second to last questions with this new car. Talking about leveling the playing field, these cars are so distinctly different looking from one another, which brings a concern of mine up, which I really don't have one yet because we don't know how these cars are truly going to race when they're right next to each other. We saw some of it on the Pro Invitational Series tonight. They wrecked literally not even through a whole lap, but that's also like not like real thing tangible besides like kind of like a simulator thing. So I'm not going to talk about that. We're not going to talk about that. But concern of mine is these cars are very different from each other visually. I don't know if it's going to affect their racing, but Zach, do you think these new cars are truly going to level out the playing field? Everyone's learning. They're adding a fifth gear into the car. Do you see this as a concern? And then also, we also want to discuss more owners in the sport. So this is kind of a two-part separate question, but talking about more owners getting involved, do you think NASCAR will expand the charter system as well? So two parts.
I'll go first, and I'll answer the leveling the competition here. I don't. It'll bring it together closer. This is the whole thing that they were talking about with the Gen 6 car there by adding the big spoiler and stuff, and it has brought the competition closer together on restarts.
Mm-hmm.
But like, here's the thing: Joe Gibbs Racing is all of a sudden not going to wake up and be poor tomorrow, right? Like, Hendrick Motorsports is not going to wake up and be poor tomorrow. Like they're not going to drop down to the Starcom or even like the JTG or front row levels. The cream will always rise to the crop, and especially in racing. The guys who have the best equipment and the best talent will almost always win the races, lead the laps, finish the best, win the championships. So it'll probably close the gap a little bit in the financial sense. But just because these teams can't spend extra money developing their own engines or not engines, they're still doing their own engines, I'm sorry, developing like parts for their cars and stuff that maybe are more durable or whatever, they'll find other ways to spend their resources, whether it be simulator time, whether it be spending more money on their pit crews, investing in faster pit crews, because with a single lug nut car, rather than having someone who's precise and accurate on 5 lug nuts, you're going to want a guy who can run around the car as fast as possible. You're going to want a better gasman and a better jackman. Things like that is where you're going to spend your money instead of on the equipment in the car if they're all sent to the teams. So the gap itself may be a little bit more equal in terms of what everybody has, under the hood a little bit more and underneath the car. But the big teams, the teams with the money, will still find a way to make themselves the best.
And then the charter system, that's the big one for me, because they talked about, I mean, they had Denny Hamlin on, they talked about new owners wanting to make their way into the sport. Matt Tifft made a statement or posted what Denny Hamlin said about new owners wanting to go into the sport. I think Steve Probst actually, not Steve Phelps, sorry, said it. Or maybe one of them talked about new owners, and they're like, yeah, we want more people to go into the sport. There's definitely interest, but you can only go so far when there's interest, but not spots. So if they were to expand the charter system, how many spots would you like to see them add?
4.
Okay.
4. I'd like to return to a 43 car field if possible, and it seems like NASCAR could get that. Not every week necessarily, but most weeks. We know that Colleague Racing has announced that they're going to go full-time Cup racing in 2022. They would certainly like to be in on the charter gang. A team like Gaunt Brothers Racing ran the full season in 2020 with Daniel Suarez. If they could get a driver in there that has some funding, maybe they could pursue a charter or at least a full-time effort and be another car in the field.
Also keeping in mind
Junior Motorsports possibly moving up to the Cup Series. I don't know how legitimate that is. I think Dale Jr. is just giving us some wishful thinking personally, because he's really, and like when I made a Reddit post and he commented about his development and stuff, I think the thing about Dale Jr. is he is most committed to the development of other drivers and the development of future Cup stars. And I don't know if he would think that a Cup team would hinder his ability to develop drivers in the Xfinity Series.
Mm-hmm.
There's other names that they want to talk about, and I don't know how legitimate they are. NASCAR I think likes to create their own hype to make it seem like it's more interesting than it is. But I think you could get by with 40 charters, and you could probably get more than 40 cars most weeks. I understand that right now, like for example, this week at Darlington, there's only 37 cars entered. But I'm sure part of that is because of the fact that the non-charter teams, a track like Darlington, is very, very expensive. Think about all the tire wear that you use, all the tires you have to go through. It's not an easy track to get around. It's pretty easy to get caught up in an accident there or to get some sort of damage. So if you're a team that's not a charter team and you're racing for money rather than just your charter, Darlington's an easy track to skip on the schedule, in my opinion. So I would put stock into that for this weekend, for example.
And then final question with all this.
Mm-hmm.
Going to talk about numbers. I want to talk about real quick what the overall differences with these cars. And we're going to talk about if the numbers are different. If we're going to see that. There was no guarantee. No one's made anything official today, because I mentioned in my last podcast, they're actually paying a company to study the numbers on the cars. So the overall difference is they have a softer tire compound that they've been testing with, if, for example, Kurt Busch at Nashville. They've been testing with all these drivers, figuring out the right tire combination, not even just for the season and going to these new tracks, but for the next gen car. They said that in the actual event that there's less opportunity for these tires to get cut by other drivers, which I think that's a really good thing. There's symmetric and composite bodies. There's more ways to race tough without consequence, which I also think is very big. These cars are supposed to be able to run on all types of tracks, was something they made very clear. They're also, like I said, street looking is the key. I'm going to have all these images up for you all to see while we're talking here, that they very much look like you could buy them from your local dealership, which I think is really cool. They also kind of look rounder. So we have just a little bit boxier in some respect, and then also the backs of them kind of look rounder. So we have some differences there. We're talking about differences with numbers though. Zach, I've made my opinion on this on my podcast. We've talked about this. But what are you thinking about those numbers placements? Do you want them in the back of the car, the front of the car? You want to keep them the same? Or does it even matter to you?
It absolutely matters to me.
Okay, good. I know it matters to you.
I listen to a Dallas Cowboys podcast, and there's a guy on the show. His name is Brian Broaddus. He also likes motorsports and is involved in an IMSA racing team in NASCAR. But he calls himself an old crusty in terms of a scout and scouting football players. I'm an old crusty NASCAR fan, okay? I may look young, I may feel young, but trust me, I'm an old crusty at heart. And this number placement stuff, they need to stop with this, okay? Like, here's the thing.
They need to stop messing with you.
Like, go look at Ricky Stenhouse Jr.'s car this weekend, okay? He has Kroger on the hood and tied at the quarter panel. You mean to tell me you couldn't put anything above the rear wheel or anything else on that car? This is how you sponsor a race car, everybody. You understand? You got a sponsor on the hood.
Mm-hmm.
Look at all these contingency sponsors. Everything along the
space.
side of the car. Look at all the space that's being filled here. You got stuff on the bumper. You got a full bumper, the deck lid.
Because here's my thing too. Like, put the side of the car up again, if you could, please. Thank you. So, like, there's so much. If you move the number up to the front of the car, at least if that's what they want to do, if that's what they decide, there's more room near the back of the car to have like sponsorship, right? Kind of like what you see there, because it's not totally centered, but at the same time, you know, if you move the number, it's going to be smaller, and that's how you brand a driver. That's how you, as a fan, know which car it is. I mean, you can pick up a paint scheme, true, but like they might change sponsors every week. Like Denny Hamlin, gosh, when he moved to when OfferPad sponsored one of his races, I was like, I don't know who this guy is. I was like, he's FedEx. Like, what are you talking about? And
like,
yeah,
the numbers are the identity of these race cars. I feel like NASCAR is going to move it though. If you watch Dale Jr.'s social media,
yeah.
a lot of hints about NASCAR moving this, and he's trying to soften the blow to all of us to make it seem okay. When NASCAR has a decision that they know is going to upset the fans, they're going to send Dale Jr. out there on Twitter, on Instagram, and soften the blow for all of us and try to make it better for everybody. I promise you, Dale, it's not working. I promise you, NASCAR, don't do it. Don't do it.
I really want to know fan comments below.
Yeah, it'll never make me stop watching NASCAR, but it'll certainly make me stop buying diecast. I'll tell you that much. And they're going to, I mean, like, I don't own any of the All-Star race cars. I don't really have any interest in owning any of the All-Star race cars. They're just, I don't like them really at all. Many of them were not good. If these teams could show me that they properly know how to use the space on these cars to brand and sponsor them, absolutely we could talk about it a little bit more. But as far as I'm concerned, I see too many cars with blank spaces, wasted spaces for sponsorship. And you can't tell me that if you can't properly sponsor and design your own race car with the currently it currently looks, then you don't deserve the extra room. That's a lazy way to sponsor your race car. It's a cop out.
Yeah, I
mean, you may not want to call the teams out on your show because it's your show, and I understand it. But I'll call them out.
Oh boy,
lazy. It's lazy.
I think it's just. I just think it's dangerous to move the numbers. I mean, you already have fans that are upset about it. But I mean,
I'm upset about it.
I know. I'm upset about it too, Zach. But NASCAR is going to do what NASCAR is going to do. And I mean, like you said, it's not going to make me stop watching the sport. It might make me stop buying diecast, which is also a big kind of part of the industry, is people love collecting these cars. But we're going to get angry. Let's not get angry. We're going to talk about more designs that make us happy. Let's go to the Darlington throwbacks. Let's move over into this race weekend. This is the end of part 1 of the 2-parter for the Buschy McBusch pre-race, and then we go into Darlington in the next episode. Thank you all so much for listening to Above the Yellow Line, the show where we talk about all the updates, theories, news, recaps, and more of the NASCAR Cup Series. Links in the descriptions below to where you can find Zachary Bell, and also links in the descriptions to where you can find me on Twitter and on the podium finish. Part 2 of this video is coming up tomorrow, Saturday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, so make sure you check that out when you have the chance. Thank you all so much for your support for this channel, and until next time, I'll see ya.